So this morning I thought it'd be good to just start with a short period of meditation, just to get us settled and ready for the day. Get me settled and ready for the day. So once we've found a comfortable way to be, as usual, we just give ourselves a little time to savor the fact that there's nothing we have to do, nowhere we have to go, no one in particular we have to be. Just aware of whatever's happening. Noticing how so many important things happen all by themselves. Blood flowing, breath coming in and out, senses working, hearing sounds, registering sensations. And there's awareness there. Without me making anything happen. And that awareness can flow down through the body to feel our connection with the earth. Not just an idea of there are my knees or my feet or my bottom, and there's the earth, but the actual sensations. Feeling the alive sensations that tell us that we're in contact with the ground or the seat. Enjoying that sense of connection, stability. Relaxing into it, giving our weight to the earth, letting it bear us up. And from there, letting the body rise up towards the sky. Now feeling into the body, with kindness, with care. Now bringing our awareness to our heart center. Not the physical heart, but that deep place which feels more like the core of our being. And just noticing, feeling into how is our heart now. It might be light-hearted or heavy-hearted. Closed-hearted or open-hearted. However the experience is, let's see if there can be kindness within it. And see if there can be metta for ourselves. Or rejoicing or compassion. Whatever's appropriate. Let's see if our heart can fill with kindness. And let's see if that kindness can overflow and pervade our whole body, our whole being. Now, if we'd like to, we could include a person or people or a situation that we're concerned about, someone else or some other people that we're practicing for. And now we could include everyone on the retreat. All of us in our different situations around the world. May we all be happy and free from suffering. And dwell in joy and great equanimity. Let's give you a minute to rearrange yourselves. We're getting there. So I ended that short meditation with a verse, very simple way of putting the four brahma viharas, the four immeasurables. May we all be happy and free from suffering and dwell in joy and great equanimity. And it seems like the earliest references to Bodhicitta in the Buddhist texts are basically the Bodhicitta at that point is a word for the four immeasurables. It's a word for the Brahma Viharas. But then it gathers momentum and depth over time as the tradition unfolds. So yesterday we started in and we spent some time gathering resources and also looking at those questions, who am I practicing with and who am I practicing for? And then we looked at the blue sky and the meaning of the blue sky in a short but intense burst of exploration. And today we're going to move on to the next part of the practice. So the blue sky is in place, it's here. And now the refuges will appear. It's not quite like that, but we'll come to that. So most of today we'll be looking at what is a refuge, which is always a good question to ask. It's those basic questions which sound like we should know the answer to them by now. They're often the best ones to ask. What actually is a refuge? And then the forms that it can take in the practice, and then our relation to the refuge in the practice. So that's what we'll be mainly engaged with. Along the way, there'll be one or two questions that I want to answer. And if you have questions, then please ask them via the chat or send them to me, or you can unmute yourself and say, what about that, Vessantara? You're welcome to do that if you'd like. Okay, so once we have the blue sky, the second point in the practice says, it's important that one calls upon something beyond oneself before commencing the practice. Traditionally, the refuge tree is quickly called up. More simply, it could be Shakyamuni Buddha or one's yidam, or even a sense of the order all around one. The order here more in its transcendental aspect as the thousand-armed Avalokiteshvara. So, talking in terms of resources for taking on suffering, this is the main resource. the main resource is that we're in touch with the refuges. So where should we start with this? Good question. Let's start with what is a refuge anyway. So a refuge is a place of safety. It's a security, isn't it? And in this case, it's a security from suffering. We find, when people meet the Buddha and they go for refuge and then they see what he's seen, they feel that they've found an island, a refuge, which is secure, which is completely reliable. That's what we're looking for, and that's what, if we're going to be of help to other beings, that's what we're going to have to keep finding more and more of in ourselves. And in the Pali Canon, people meet the Buddha, and he can be a refuge for them. And he can be a refuge for them for two reasons. Firstly, because he knows how things are. He knows the nature of experience, the nature of existence. He may be wrong about practical things. If you were to ask most of the awakened beings in Buddhist history, what the world was like, they'd tell you it was flat. And they'd be wrong about that. But in terms of the nature of experience, it's flowing, ungraspable, knowing nature. And the nature of the mind, it's open, knowing, and so on. Yeah, they're completely clear about all of that. And in terms of how not to suffer and how to be completely fulfilled, they're completely clear about that. And not only that, but they have fully developed positive qualities. So in terms of the Bodhisattva path, you have the 6 perfections, and the 6th one is Prajnaparamita, where you really see, you know the nature of experience. But then you have the first 5, in which all kinds of positive qualities are developed. And if we're to do justice to, I was going to say to Buddhism, but it's actually justice to what a human being can be, to our potential as human beings, then we need to really unfold all those qualities. Yes, we can do a lot of insight work and see that there's no self and so on. But in a way, that's a preliminary. It's a kind of clearing of the ground. It's a clearing away of the misunderstanding and the confusion that we have about life, which has been preventing the real unfolding of our love and our compassion and our generosity and our patience and our energy and our freedom. And it's those qualities that really have to unfold as well. Otherwise, we've sort of stopped part of the way along the path. And yes, we've freed ourselves quite a lot. But we haven't begun to unfold all that richness. And yes, I've met quite a number of people over the years who've gone decent ways down the path. And some of them, yes, you can feel like, okay, they've got really clear about how things are, and they're clear that there's no self and so on. But actually, that's great, but there's something kind of missing. And then there's been a smaller kind of handful of people that I've met in my life who I just felt completely, I walked into a great, yes, I don't know, it's like a great aura of sort of love. And I felt like they were completely there with me. And yes, of course, there was no self, that was obvious, but that wasn't the point. They were just completely open-hearted. And they were, and I had just kind of wanted to just throw myself on the ground. And yeah, I really, really wanted to be like them. So it felt like those people could be much more a sort of full refuge than somebody else who could perhaps help me to see something of the nature of things, fantastic though that is. You see what I mean? So yeah, we want a complete version of the path, and we want a complete refuge and a complete unfolding of how things are, so that for ourselves, but so that we can really be of benefit, so that we can really have an impact on the suffering of the world. Yeah. So a person with those qualities is a full refuge. And if we're to become our own refuge, then we have to have those qualities. Over time, we have to become someone who knows from our own direct experience how things are, and whose heart is fully opened. And yeah, it's kind of in traditional Buddhist terms, there was panya vimutti and citta vimutti. There's liberation by wisdom and liberation of heart. And so we want that whole package together. And with that, we'll feel free, and we'll feel, really like not just that, okay, we're free of suffering, but there will be that great open, liberated awareness that cares for everything and everyone, just naturally. That's the real refuge. That's what we're after. And it's sort of difficult these days because what we're surrounded by is views of human beings that are incredibly limited. We're surrounded by views of life that are very, very limited. I had a question about that, which I think I might kind of relates to this. It's taking us back to yesterday, but maybe that's all right just for now. So somebody was asking, they appreciated the practice yesterday and those questions, and it was very fruitful. I'm gaining a confidence and motivation to continue my altruistic efforts in the world. That's great. However, I feel I'm missing something. My rational mind, no doubt based on my cultural conditioning towards scientific materialism, prevents me from believing that such a practice can really, whatever that means, perhaps that's the crux of the question, can really make a difference. So my rational mind based on scientific materialism prevents me believing that such a practice can really make a difference in the world, or can have an influence on the world. So when we send metta to some situation or some people, or we practice metta for one another, does that actually have any effect on anyone? So the questioner goes on, so I was wondering whether there's any part of the practice that could be developed that would help break down that barrier. Some train of thought that could help me build some faith that the development of the bodhicitta can be a force for good in the world, beyond the building of confidence in myself to turn towards suffering in the world, which is, of course, a great benefit in itself. So there's a lot in that. And I've been triggered back to it by this sort of comment about sort of scientific materialism, because that is the kind of context in which we tend to be living in the West, that there's life, there is this one life and it's not that long, and then, at a certain point, you get that flat line on the hospital monitor, and that's the end of everything. That's it. So you have that sort of nihilistic view. And so what are you going to fill this dreary time until that point comes with? Well, there's an awful lot of advertising giving you all sorts of opportunities to fill it with all kinds of things. So it's a very impoverished, sorry, some of you are working in a second language, a very sort of poor sort of view of life. So yeah, sure, Bodhicitta practice and Tonglen, they're mind training practices. So partly they are just us training ourselves to respond creatively in all kinds of situations in life. Yeah, so whether or not they have any effect out there, as the questioner says, it does have a really good effect on our own mind. And then when we meet with suffering, when we meet with something difficult, we find ourselves having been trained to sort of turn towards it in a resourceful way. So it's worth it anyway. But there does seem to be a sort of added dimension of a sort of subtle influence that these things have. But the questioner's rational mind is going, well, I don't see how that works. And we have to honor the integrity of our rational mind. Yes, we don't want to just believe things that aren't true, just because we'd like to feel they were true. That's we don't want to be deceiving ourselves in that sort of way. So our rational mind, it has that useful quality to it. Yeah, there is a spiritual integrity in that. We are on the path to truth as Buddhists. So what can help? Well, it probably is worth just, if we're basing ourselves in scientific materialism, just to bring that up against our Buddhism, our Dharma. Very often we have beliefs that exist, they kind of coexist in us, but they don't actually kind of ever quite meet. So under different circumstances, at different times, we believe completely different things. So whilst I believe that, yes, I am striving on the path for enlightenment, another little bit of me thinks that that's completely, Vessantara will never be able to do that because he's not the sort of person who can. Yeah. And I can hold those two views, and one of them sort of subtly sabotages the other. But somehow I've got used to both of them because I've thought a lot of both of them over the years. So they both kind of carry on. So we need to bring them into relationship and go, look, hang on, you can't, one of you has to not be right. So can you please have the discussion and explore and find out which of you is actually right and which one we're going to base our life on. Yeah. So quite often we, on one side, yes, we believe the Buddha was awakened, and also we have this kind of scientific materialist, nihilist thing somewhere going on, sort of subterranean, underground. So we need to bring those together. Yeah, we need to be aware, actually, for the Buddha, that if you'd gone to the Buddha and explained to him about scientific materialism, he would have said, no, that's wrong. It's Uchedavada. That's right in his term. It's the view of cutting off, that everything just is cut off at death. Yeah. And it's nihilism. And he would have completely denied that and felt sad that people were so identified with the body and with material things that had dominated their whole view of life, and that they were missing so much of the richness of the mind. But we can also take, we're not dismissing the scientific either, but if we really go into that, we start to discover that things become much more mysterious and strange and unfathomable than the everyday level of things. If we go on to the sort of quantum level, then seems like things can affect one another, you know, at infinite sort of distances immediately, and there's no way that you can see how that could have happened. There are things like that going on. So it's not so hard to imagine that when the universe is really that strange and mysterious, that we can all be affecting one another. And I think it also helps to kind of notice how we're setting ourselves up in terms of what is the authority inside us. It's like we have different faculties. You know, we have the rational mind, we have the wisdom of the body, which can be very profound. We have our whole emotional side, you know, particularly all those sort of positive emotions. We have imagination, and we have intuition, which can be a deep knowing, which isn't based on what we've got in through the senses. And the tendency is for one or another of those to be the one that we identify with and the one that's kind of in control. Yeah? And it will kind of allow others in, but it's the one that decides. Yeah? Whereas actually what we want is a kind of council of all of our faculties, all, you know, working together. So yeah, and very often once we're identified with one, we feel a bit threatened if some other one, you know, starts to take over. If we're a very rational person and strong emotion happens, then that's a little bit difficult. Yeah, and the rational mind likes to feel that it's explaining everything and everything is therefore known and therefore it's secure and we're okay. But then you can have deep sort of spiritual intuitions which don't fit. But actually they're your experience. I have a good friend who was brought up in a sort of atheist household, and then they went to uni and they did a science subject, and then they became a Buddhist, and then they noticed that they still had a strong kind of materialist view of life, really sort of quite embedded. So they really, you know, when it came down to it, they felt, well, life, you know, death was the end. And then one day they sat down to meditate, and in the course of that meditation, they had an experience, and when they came out of it, they knew that death wasn't the end, and they completely turned their view around. And it wasn't that they had some kind of, oh, I must really have faith in the Buddha and he said, it wasn't that at all. They had an experience of the nature of mind, which showed them that you know, well, they caught a little glimpse of the deathless, let's put it like that. And that profound experience, just in a few minutes, a few moments almost, you know, that sort of changed them. So we have to do our best to reflect on the fullness of a human being, to reflect on the tradition. As far as I can't think of any realized Buddhist teacher over the centuries who's ever come to the conclusion that materialism was it. And I think it's helpful to reflect on the blue sky as the nature of awareness, as the nature of mind, and just keep exploring that, feeling into that, and letting go in meditation at times of just whatever story we're telling ourselves, whether it's some kind of story about materialism or even whether it's a story about, you know, how wonderful things are, just coming down to our basic experience. If we go deeply enough into that, we'll know. We'll know how things are. And then we won't have to theorize, and we won't have to tell anybody or not tell anybody. We'll just know. Yeah. That's the thing about the Buddhist, I was going to say the Buddhist vision of life, but it's not even a vision can sound a bit sort of like a bit up in the air somewhere. Jack's had another of his visions, maybe we should call the doctor. Yeah, it's not like that. Yeah. If anything, it's what we have is the Buddhist knowing. We have the Buddhist knowing of how things are. We have the Buddhist knowing of experience. And that's what we all have to have for ourselves. And with that Buddhist knowing of how things are, well, when people have that experience, they say things like, "It's wonderful, Lord. It's amazing." Yeah, they see life in a completely different way. They see just how rich and beautiful and wonderful life can be with a liberated mind. And they see what incredible potential there is. And the Buddhist knowing about life is amazing. Yeah. So yes, we are surrounded by a culture which is saying, it's very just, can you eat it? What do I get for this? But we have to somehow sort of find our way out of that. That's a large part of the samsara that in this practice we're setting ourselves up to help beings find the way out of. So we have to work in ourselves to make sure that we're not kind of falling into the sort of being part of that problem. Yeah, so we can reflect on, yes, that modern science shows us that the world is really quite extraordinary, that the whole Buddhist tradition, out of that knowing, is saying, nah, materialism, nah, not likely. Yeah, that we can reflect on. Yeah, we can really take ourselves into the blue sky, take ourselves into what that awareness is like, that potential of our own mind. Just explore that. And we can just lay aside all the stories so that we give ourselves some space in which other aspects of ourselves can flower. And we just really have a look and see, put down all the theories, and we can come to know how things are. Right, on that rather long note, I think maybe we need a cup of something. So let's give ourselves 20 minutes. So that will be about a quarter past the hour. Yeah, so I'll see you back there then.
Right, do you want another drink?
No, I haven't drunk that one. Thank you. Didn't
you the only order member in Malta, Akshobin?
I am indeed, yes.
Oh. How are things in Malta?
In what sense?
Well, in a Buddhist sense, Buddhist.
Oh, in a Buddhist sense. Well, there's me, and I've started an online center during COVID, so I got lots of people turn up to learn to meditate and be calm, but it's now turned into a Sangha. It's quite small. There's just 4 or 5 regulars at the moment, but I only started a few months ago, so far so good.
Brilliant.
I can't figure out who's asking the question, though.
It's me, Padmajata.
Padmajata, hi.
Yes, fantastic. Gosh, marvellous news. The Dharma goes everywhere.
It doesn't.
I can't figure out who's answering the question.
It's just.
Akshobin. Hello,
Right.
I'm Vijayashri. Hi.
Hi.
Yeah. Okay, so you're back with me. And before the break, we did some practice, tuning into our heart. And then we've started exploring refuge and what a refuge is and the fullness of the refuge. And then I spent quite a while on that question about what would help to open our horizons to more possibilities of mind. Yeah, because certainly Buddhist tradition is very open, kind of takes things like telepathy for granted, which may not be influencing one another at a distance, but it's certainly knowing things at a distance. Yesterday I was talking about the Arya Pariyesana Sutta, and the Buddha, once he's awakened, he thinks, now who can I share this Dharma with? And he thinks, there's my 5 ascetic friends. Where are they? They're in Sarnath. Okay, I'll go there and see them. So, and that's just sort of taken for granted in the Buddhist tradition, right the way down, that if your mind is very, very open, you'll pick up all kinds of things. And Bhante tells a story about translating for Khetche Rinpoche, one of his teachers. An American couple comes to see Khetche Rinpoche, and Bhante is translating from English into, I guess, Hindi. And Bhante notices after a while, as the conversation gets more animated, that at a certain point Khetche Rinpoche is starting to answer the question before Bhante's kind of gotten much of the way through the translation. And, and he thinks, well, there's only one reason that could be happening. Yeah, so in a way it's not a big deal. But yeah, things like that just open you out to the possibilities. And as well as dwelling on, as well as letting go of stories and just looking to see what's there and looking at into the blue skies, the nature of mind, Yogacara, I think, is a really good approach to the Dharma to explore, because it really takes us into how all our it can take us into how we're not separate finally from everyone else. It's one approach into that subject, seeing how we create a subject-object duality, how we separate out as a sort of seamless appearances into me in here and you out there. But it can also make us aware that all our experience is an experience of mind. So to be radical about it, none of us has ever experienced matter. Matter is a hypothesis, we sort of assume that it must be out there, but all we ever have is our mental experience of it. I don't know whether the cushion in front of me is actually a real material thing somehow, because all I'm experiencing is my mind's interpretation of it. So see, banging the microphone. yeah, so those reflection along those sort of paths can start to help some of our, at least it throws up our assumptions and gives us a chance to look at them. Okay, so meanwhile, back at the refuge and back at the Bodhicitta practice, I'm going to talk a bit longer and then we'll do some more practice. So in the practice, we're now calling up some kind of a refuge. This is in Parami's version. In the 1990s version, I think it just says, I've got it written down. Yeah, before one there appears the refuge tree, which can be hastily assembled, I seem to remember it says, which makes it sound like some sort of IKEA flat pack. You just need an Allen key and away you go. So in this version that has come from Parami's discussions with Bhante, there's more kind of flexibility in how you experience the refuge, what you call up, so that you feel that you're in contact with the qualities of awakening. That's really what we want. We go to the underlying principle. We want to feel in contact with the qualities of awakening. So whatever helps us do that is going to be the most helpful thing. So we can visualize the whole refuge tree, and very often when we practice together, people describe the refuge tree in greater or lesser detail, because that's a kind of a common practice that we have. But as Parami says, it could simply visualize the Buddha or your Yidam, have a sense of the kind of guiding spirit of the order that's expressed through all of us. That could be there. But I think it can be anything which really kind of, for you, communicates that sense of the qualities of the refuge. So it could be a symbol. I mean, you could have a lotus or a vajra or a dharma chakra or anything like that. Or it could even just be a kind of rainbow cloud, just whatever gives you that sense of all the richness and qualities of awakening that are there. And again, some of us are more visual than others, so some people it will be perhaps a more detailed visualization. For others, it will be just a very strong felt sense of being in the presence of those qualities. And that's what's important, really, is that sense of being in contact with those qualities. There are some people who are very good visualizers, but they're kind of, the visualization is a bit like looking at a photo or something. It's a bit sort of dead. If you visualize the refuges and it just feels like, okay, I'm just looking at a picture, there's no kind of life to it. Traditionally, it's said that it's good that you really kind of animate it, imagine them as if you were looking at a group of people. And so, there's all the refuges, and there are all the teachers of the present, and there's Dilgo Khyentse, and he leans over to talk to Jamyang Khyentse, and Jamyang Khyentse smiles and says something back. And in some of the traditional texts, it says you can watch one of the bodhisattvas kind of go off, to sort of help out somewhere and then come back later. So, it's better that you really get the sense of the aliveness of it. That we're not just creating pictures for the sake of it. We want to be in touch with the aliveness of the tradition and the aliveness of the qualities. That's what we want. Okay. So is that clear? That's the kind of the what of what we visualize. Any questions about that?
You mentioned a possibly using a lotus or a symbol, but then there's a very strong emphasis, if you like, on the human and on the form, those qualities being embodied. So that makes me a little bit wary of the idea of a symbol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I don't know if you all heard Sadaloka's question, but Sadaloka's saying that in the practice, there's a very strong emphasis on the qualities being embodied and sort of in the human. And so that makes him a bit wary if you just have a Vajra or a lotus. And I kind of agree that where we're moving to is wanting to have a sense of the qualities really embodied. But I think if need be, I'd rather that people at least had a sense of the qualities. And yeah, you could have a Vajra which then sort of turned into a Bodhisattva holding a Vajra or something. But to start with, if you're just sort of trying to find some kind of contact with the qualities, personally, I'm all right if somebody, just if you start with a lotus or whatever. But I do take your point too. Okay, so that's
sorry, can I just ask something? Sorry, I know it's hard to see a hand raised. It sort of connects with what Sadaloka is saying, I think, in a way. I mean, is it crucial that we're connecting with our sense of the transcendental nature of the refuge? However that might be envisioned.
Mm-hmm. Well, for it to be a refuge, there has to be an aspect which has transcended suffering, transcended the suffering of creating a subject-object duality. So yes, if you were to visualize the Buddha and feel like, oh, well, he's a very good human being, that wouldn't be a refuge as such. Yeah. So in that way, it is important. And I had another question, which I will go into now. Today may end up being a little bit us getting our kind of some understandings in place. After today, it gets all a bit more into things which are difficult to do, but are quite simple in terms of what we're trying to do. Yes, this one. So this says, last month, while starting my Shakyamuni sadhana, I suddenly thought, it's silly to think of myself as a form in the sky. I am the sky. It's my limitless mind. Then I immediately thought, and it's even more silly to think of Shakyamuni as a form too. So I merged us both as sky, and I just saw, in inverted commas, felt a vast Dharma chakra turning, pouring gold down, all Shakyamuni's perfections, like the rain of the Dharma which I soaked up. If I choose, I can see his human and or his archetypal form, but this formless approach, having both myself and Shakyamuni just as blue sky, seems to be working for me. Do you have any thoughts on it? So that, I do have a thought about it, which is just sort of kind of forming. But you can, how in Buddhism you have the Trikaya doctrine. Yeah. So you have the Nirmanakaya, the body of form, you have the Sambhogakaya, which we explain as more the appearance of awakening on the archetypal level, and you have the Dharmakaya, which is kind of like the nature the nature of things, to put it very, very simply. So you can take refuge, or go for refuge, to any of those three kayas. I put it to you. Let's just try this out for size. And Sadaloka and Vijayamara and others can jump on me if you think, oh no, I'm not sure about that. Please feel free. We can just explore it together. So, yeah, very often when we come in contact with Buddhism, our refuge starts with being more in the Nirmanakaya. We think, well, there's the historical Buddha, and he gained enlightenment, and he taught the Dharma. So he's an example of what I can do, and I can follow his Dharma that he taught 2,500 years ago, and I can connect with the sort of descendants of the Sangha that he started, and you know, they're my refuge, and I will work to do, you know, what the Buddha did 2,500 years ago until I'm enlightened, following the teachings and methods that he put down. Then as time goes on, very often you enter into a sort of deeper relationship with the Buddha, and particularly, you know, if you start doing some kind of sadhana and visualization practices, they kind of catalyze an experience of the qualities of awakening on a different level, yeah, on the level of something that's more what we call archetypal. And so then, you know, as in the going for refuge and prostration practice, you have all these figures that are that you're going for refuge to, which are made of light. We have all the bodhisattvas, the Buddhas, and so on. And you know, that's your refuge. So this questioner was doing a sadhana with that Sambhogakaya form of Shakyamuni that they were visualizing day after day after day. But then at a certain point, through their practice, through the momentum and tendency of their practice, they thought, no, actually, you know, does that form, do we even need a form? Can there just be that open, free, loving blue sky, which is a symbol for the mind itself, for liberated, free awareness. So at that point, as far as I can see, they are moving from the Sambhogakaya level more to the Dharmakaya level. So it's more like then the refuge is in that sort of Dharmakaya experience. And those three aren't mutually exclusive, and if you like, the complete package is that, you know, we can operate on all those three levels. So awakening is going right from the most formless level of experience, you know, through the qualities of awakening have pervaded all the three levels. Yes, the formless, the form, and the kamaloka. But yes, I'm partly saying this because I'm meeting quite a lot of practitioners who are feeling like they go through phases with their practice where it feels as if the refuge or the yidam wants to just be formless. And I suppose I want to allow that possibility, because finally, you know, the qualities of awakening aren't limited to a particular form. Finally, we can find them anywhere, in any appearance of mind. Once mind is really illumined, then all the appearances of mind are illumined. So in answer to the questioner's question, do I have any thoughts about it? I think, yes, that can be a perfectly good and helpful way to practice when your practice naturally unfolds like that. And the one thing I would say is that we want to see if we can relax that sense of my mind is the blue sky, Shakyamuni's mind is the blue sky. What happens if we just let that story drop as well? Where does that leave us? What kind of experience does that take us into? Okay, that was that. Yeah, so we want to experience awakening both as in its sort of essential nature, the kind of, in its limitless nature, and we want to experience it embodied in human being. Yeah, what that's actually like. Yes, even a human being with a limited body. How can that express itself? And we want to express itself in form, but absolutely the most radiant, the most beautiful. Yeah. So on all those different levels, it's all of that is good. Yeah, and it's like we end up with a sort of harmonic scale of awakening. More or less embodied, more or less appearing in form. And we want both the completely empty, open nature, yeah, and all the appearances, all illumined, yeah, everything transformed. Yeah. But there does need to be, coming back to Padmajata, right, there does need to be, that transcendental element. Otherwise, it's not a refuge. Okay. Good. So we've looked at what is a refuge. We've looked at what we can visualize in terms of the practice that communicates the qualities of awakening to us. And I've just propounded a theory of going for refuge and the three kayas. And maybe that's enough ideas for one morning. So let's have a period of meditation. And this afternoon we'll come back and we'll carry on. And we left this question about what relation we enter into with the refuge. And we'll look at that in the next session. Okay. So once we're settled, let's see if we can find a sense of a movement of energy down through the body, movement of relaxation movement of letting go. Letting everything that's been happening flow down into the ground. It's as if we come into land on the earth. Bring our awareness and our energy down to the ground. And then down into the earth. So we're well rooted, well anchored. And it's checking we're in a helpful posture. Feeling into the body. All those changing sensations. Finding the breath. Following the out breath. relaxing with it into a sense of spaciousness. Letting that lead us into vast blue sky. All around in every direction. Warm blue sky. Full of infinite potential. Now we sense, we feel, we see part of the sky in front of us becoming brighter. And out of the sky appears whatever for us really embodies the qualities of awakening. as we let ourselves feel in the presence of those qualities, we can let ourselves relax. Here is a refuge. Here is safety from suffering. Here is love and compassion and clear knowing of how things are. Here is the best place we could possibly be. And those alive qualities are communicated to us. So we can bathe, soak in those qualities. qualities for ourselves, qualities to share with others. Now, whatever form the qualities have taken dissolves away into the open blue sky. The blue sky fades away. We sit with our experience as it is. Nothing to do. Before we finish, just like to remind you that we're doing this as a Dharma event. Originally, I was planning to do a retreat, so off my own bat, but then being in contact with Adhisthana, I became aware of just what an eye-wateringly large amount of money they're losing this year through the COVID pandemic. Yeah, so we've joined forces, and I'm very happy that I can do the retreat here, really grateful. But yes, please do give what you can. It will really make a difference. And Adhisthana looks very big and established and so on, but actually, yeah, nobody can sort of lose the sort of money that they're losing indefinitely. And so yes, I know they're planning to give some of the dana to me, but if we can raise a decent amount of money, then we can really make a difference to Adhisthana for this. So yes, please do what you can. I'm aware it's a difficult time, but please don't forget. And thank you to those of you who have already given. Okay, a good break, and see you later.